Please be upstanding for his worship the Mayor of Pendle, Councillor Ken Parker.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. Just before we start the meeting officially, although I'm quite sure that everybody here can't miss the fact that this meeting is being filmed in its entirety, and so can we act accordingly as well? Not that we don't know. Not that we don't know. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just a little technically according, we need not have 1 minute to go. Can we start the meeting with apologies? Councillor Whip.
Mr. Chairman, can I give apologies for Councillor Alice Mann, who is visiting relatives down south.
Councillor Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I give apologies to Councillors Ashton on the camera shot and Judy Henderson, all of who were at work and things here, but slightly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mason.
Apologies for Councillor Nadine Harmer, Steve Petty, Noel McAvoy, Jennifer Sell, and I'm delighted to announce apologies for Christine Wakeford, who is now the new MP for Buryside.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2 on tonight's agenda then, declaration of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of a disposable pecuniary interest in any item on tonight's agenda? Members must declare any pecuniary interest and must leave the room and not participate in any debate if they have so. Any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda? None? Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last council. To approve the correct record or otherwise, the minutes of the council meeting in September 2019.
Mr. Mayor, can I bring the minutes of that meeting?
Thank you, Councillor.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Whip. James. Item 4 on the agenda is recorded votes. Members are also reminded that in accordance with Rule 17 of the procedures of full council, all votes on budget issues will be recorded, named votes. This includes all motions and amendments in relation to agenda item number 14 on tonight's agenda. Item 5. Announcements from the Mayor and Leader of the Council. Ladies and gentlemen, I have 1 or 2 announcements. Following the general election, congratulations were extended to Andrew Stevenson on his re-election as MP for Pendle. Commiserations were also expressed to the losing candidates who had attended the count. I believe that I should also congratulate Councillor Christine Wakefield on his election as MP for Bury South. As ex officio returning officer, I personally would like to thank all the staff and officers of the council for the work that they put in preparing for and running that sort of additional impromptu election, in addition to all their normal duties in what's traditionally a very busy time of year for council staff and officers. And one or two personal kind of announcements. The Mayor's Commendation Awards, after a very successful first round of awarding some 55 awards across Pendle, the second round of award nominations is planned for the 20th of February 2020, and therefore I'll put out another call to councillors. If you feel that you have any candidates worthy of receiving a Mayor's Commendation Award within your borough, within your ward, or within your life experience who live locally here in Pendle, then please feel free to nominate them. The list for the second round of nominations is already underway, but we do need to process any nominations. Diary dates for 1920. On Monday the 23rd of December, the Mayoress is holding a tombola in association with ASDA here in Colne, and any proceeds from that are being sort of awarded to the Mayoress's charity fund. And so I would hope if anybody wishes to support that activity, they'd be very welcome to contact the Mayoress, and as part of that you can volunteer, or if you so wish, then you can supply a raffle or a tombola prize, which will be very, very welcome by the Mayoress. On Friday, February the 7th, 2020, the Mayoress's charity is providing a showpiece theatre production called Pendle at the Proms, which will be held at Colne Muni, and this is basically a music and song extravaganza in aid of the Mayoress's charity funds, and fundamentally it's a royal variety performance plus last night of the Proms plus Royal Albert Hall Remembrance Sunday contribution, all rolled into the one show at Colne Muni, and all the proceeds that we get from that will go to the Mayoress's charity fund. And I'm looking to each and every one of you to buy tickets for this. It will be a good thing, and it will also be done in conjunction with an invitation to the mayors across Lancashire. And judging from this year's chain gang, I would expect at least 10 of the Lancashire mayors to turn up here. And the final one is that on Friday, March the 6th, is the diary date for the Mayor's Charity Ball this year, but I'll supply details of that at some future date. And despite various things, a little hiatus since this is the last council meeting before Christmas, I'd like to invite all councillors and officers of the council who are present this evening to join me in the members' room after the meeting for a little Christmas celebration, traditional fare of mince pies and a glass of sherry or number 10. After the meeting is concluded then, those who wish may come along to the next parlour and join them. And that's it. Thank you very much. No announcements from the leader. Item 6. Questions on notice from the public to the leader. And I understand that we have several of those. Can I, before we start this, just simply state that the questions must be presented as written. To which you will receive a response from the leader, but there will be no open or general discussion about any of the motions. So, can I therefore ask Andrew Hubbard to present his question to the leader?
If the demolition of the Walton Lane Cemetery Lodge to go ahead, what will the leader feel that it would achieve in terms of new grave plots? And this seems a very short fix to a much bigger problem ahead in terms of capacity.
Mr. Mayor, can I start off by thanking Mr. Hubbard for coming this evening to ask the question? I agree with the opening word in the question, and these are the words, if the demolition. I can confirm that if the council are minded to demolish the lodge, we are unable to do so without permission from the Secretary of State. I'm aware that a certain councillor has been misleading members of the public with the false news that the council has already made a decision to demolish Walton Lane Cemetery Lodge. But let me assure Mr. Hubbard, the council has not taken such a decision as it's outside of our hands. If we were to create additional burial plots, and this is the second part of his question for the people of Nelson, I'm unable to quantify the income to the council as the work has not been done by our officers to this extent because the decision hasn't been made. One thing is for certain to all of us, that at some point we will die. Whether we choose to be buried or cremated, then as a responsible council leader, I, along with colleagues, must plan in advance to provide spaces for our loved ones to be buried, and that's across Pendle. But let me reiterate to you, the council has not made a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Ackley. Are you satisfied with the answer?
To a point, obviously, it is a small graveyard site, and you do.
Okay, thank you very much. Steve Moore. Or Steve Moore.
So again, this is about Walton Lane Lodge. So can I ask the leader if some of the recently secured Pendle regeneration monies will be used, should be used to renovate Walton Lane Cemetery Lodge, which will then generate further much needed income for the borough in either sale or rent as a residential property or as a commercial or commercial.
Thank you.
Can I thank Mr. Moore for his question? I can inform him that whilst many residents were written by the Member of Parliament for Pendle with a loan of up to £25 million for Nelson, not a single penny of that cash has been received by the council. And I look forward, like no doubt Mr. Moore is, and many others across Nelson, in that promise being fulfilled at some point in the near future. In the absence of any money, I'm unable to commit any money from our already severely depleted funds for the renovation of the lodge. And it's also worth noting that whilst Nelson was the only town promised any money, I'm aware that Cornwall and Oswick had put bids forward in different plots to the government, but they were unfortunately never even made it past the first round. So the council has not got a single penny of that, this so-called 25 million, Mr. Moore.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barlow?
Right, before I ask my question, I'm going to say that a lot of people, in our area, have actually said they would like to say what.
Sorry.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
Can you please read the question that you wish to ask?
Regarding the demolition of the lodge, can I ask the leader what investigations have been done to see if demolishing the lodge will contravene curtilage laws as you understand the gates in the chapter of Homestead buildings?
Councillor Whitman. Well, okay. Is that a petition that you wish to present to the council? If so, can we take it down and will you present it?
Yes.
Mr Mayor, we've just been having a look and there's quite a lot of signatures from Malaysia, exotic places like
Notwithstanding
Ashington.
that council that there is no debate on members of the public, can we just sort of bring that petition down or take it away at the moment?
Mr Mayor, can I also thank Mrs Moore for her question? In response to her question, at this stage no investigations have been undertaken by my officers, and the council is not even in a position, even if we were minded to expand the cemetery, as I've mentioned earlier in my responses. I want to apologise on behalf of the council to the residents who have turned up tonight and all those people from within Pendle that have signed this petition. That if they've been misled by a certain councillor about Monday and Saturday, that is not the case. It's very easy, Mr Mayor, to set up a petition on false news. It's a shame that that particular councillor has failed to report the facts back to those residents.
No, I'm sorry. The response is there. Thank you very much, the three of you, for asking those questions. And thank you, Councillor Whittle, for responding to that. Can we now move on to the next item on the agenda then? Which is questions on notice from the public. Sorry, questions on notice by members of the leader to committee chairman or representative of an outside body on matters not otherwise on the agenda. Those have already, I think, been circulated to everybody. And again, the question must remain submitted in written form. And first item on the agenda is to be asked by Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Leader, you will recall that at the July Council meeting you assured that the transfer of Barford Memorial Park and Heritage Centre would be completed by September the 1st. At the September Council meeting you stated that it would be done within 2 to 3 weeks. And now, at the 10th of December when I said this, and I do appreciate it, Chair, that it has still not been resolved. Is this indicative of your promises and actions?
Mr Mayor, Councillor Turner will recall that over 12 months ago, when his party were running this council, they had a full 12 months to sort out this issue. They've constantly been pestered by the parish council in Barrowford to resolve it, but chose every time to push it back. And in fact, on certain occasions, refused to meet with the parish council. When I became leader in May, I was approached by the parish council, and I want to congratulate Philip Moresdale for taking a significant lead in terms of resolving this issue. Right, that at the September meeting I said it would take 2 or 3 weeks. I'm sure he will, in his follow-up question, congratulate me on behalf of the council for fulfilling our promise to transfer the lease finally to the parish council. It's been a long time coming, but I'm really happy that this administration has delivered on the promises that were made to the parish council a number of years ago.
Councillor Witt, I believe you have a supplemental. Apologies. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the leader has obviously preempted that I was going to congratulate Mr Moresdale for the efforts and the work that he has been putting over the last 3 years. He is also, obviously, I'm pleased to say thank you to the leader for at least, now the lease has been exchanged, the completion can be concluded. It will be a nice Christmas present and a good start to the new year for Barrowford Parish Council. Thank you both very much, but it has been a long time. And
is there a question of this?
Yeah, the question of it, I'm just going to say, I trust, Mr Mayor, I trust that the length of time this has taken was not indicative of the 23 resolutions of the 30 proposals that he brought forward in July of what he was going to do for this council. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Webb, do you have a supplementary, I understand?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking on Councillor Turner's last comment there, could I ask the leader if he is aware how many of those points that we agreed between the Liberal group and the Labour group have now been fulfilled? I'm sorry to catch him on the hop, but it is a considerable number. What I was going to ask, Mr. Mayor, as a supplementary, is the leader aware of the frustrating involvement of the Heritage Trust for the North West in the transfer arrangements and the signing of the lease that's been referred to between the Pendle Heritage Centre and ourselves, which will be transferred over to Barrowford Parish Council? And does he believe that this was a significant contributory factor to the delay that's been caused? And finally, Mr. Mayor, is the leader of the council aware that Colnes Alkin Courts Park transferred to Comtown Council yesterday, and does this demonstrate the willingness of this authority to fulfil their promises in terms of community asset transfers and the local administration of local parks by the very local councils that we have in the parish and town councils? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just answering Councillor Taylor's point, I would have expected a question from him as, I assume, the leader of the Conservative group of this council, the new leader, asking me where we were in terms of the 30-point plan, but clearly he can wait till the next council meeting. But let me just give him an early indication that this administration has fulfilled, if not all, but virtually most of those promises that we made to the people of this borough back in May. In terms of Councillor David Whip's point, I wish to reiterate again and commend Mr Morsdale, for the sake of embarrassing him, for the efforts that he's put in, certainly between 2015 and 18, and certainly since May of this year, in harnessing the excellent relationship that this administration has got with all our town and parish councils across our wonderful borough. This administration of both Labour and Liberal Democrats are quite clear we will work with our town and parish councils and transfer services where there's a willingness to do so in the face of the savage cuts that we've had since 2010. But can I commend Comtown Council for finally doing what the previous administration at Comtown Council failed to do in terms of Alkin Courts Park, and likewise ask Councillor Turner at his next meeting of the Parish Council, thank them for their partnership working with this council. Clearly we've had issues with some other partners other than the Parish Council who were dragging the feet, but I'm glad that Barrowford Parish Council and Comtown Council can have a happy Christmas.
Fine, I will do that tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we move on to question 2 on that, which is another question to be asked by Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leader, you will recall in July and again in September we had discussions at council meetings on environment and are collectively agreed this council becoming environmentally considerate. I will therefore ask that this council request Lancashire County Council consideration to request of all transport companies that when any form of public transport becomes blocked or unable to serve, all tickets, passes and returns can be used on all other forms of public transport to the ticket destination, thereby facilitating encouragement for use of public transport.
Thank you kindly, Councillor Turner. Councillor Rankbar.
One word answer, Mr Mayor, yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Supplemental questions? Councillor Webb?
Mr Mayor, do I take it that Councillor Turner was referring to Northern Trains and the problems that we've had with people being dumped in Burnley and then struggling to get through to Nelson and Colne and beyond? And if we are, can I ask why the recent meeting with senior management of Northern Trains was cancelled due to lack of business.
Councillor Witt, the question is supposed to be to the leader.
Yes.
Councillor Turner.
Yes, I'm asking a question of the leader.
Can I come back to the supplementary, sir?
Go on then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, following on from that, the reason for this question was quite simply not because of the management incapacities of Northern Rail. It was purely because in recent inclement weather, rail lines had been flooded, trains were restricted from travelling on those trains, and one of my constituents lost a very important meeting and had a 2-hour delay because the train that he was travelling on, he couldn't transfer with the ticket to other forms of public transport. Now, they do it in other boroughs, they do it in other authorities, that I know, and I know quite effectively and quite well, so that when any form of public transport is refrained from action, either by flood, by incident, or through any roadworks or whatever is happening, people can then transfer to a similar form of public transport to use the ticket that they've already pre-purchased. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Turner. Question 3. So, Councillor Rickford, you want to come back?
Mr. Mayor, in response to Councillor Turner, I think I've answered supplementary in my initial response.
Yeah.
In terms of Councillor Witt, the issues around Northern Rail, the last meeting was cancelled due to a lack of business, and I took the decision on behalf of the council because Northern Rail said they didn't have anything to discuss. But the next one is due, I think in February, quarterly. I think the next one is due in February, and we'll certainly be raising some of the issues that Pendle residents have been suffering over the last few years.
Thank you, Councillor Rickford. Question 3. Again, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Leader, first of all, I must advise I've reported this matter to the Cabinet Member for Highways and I'm awaiting his response. I have had brought to my attention again the dangerous conditions on the M65 between junctions 11 and 14 and also between 14 and 11. When in the event of heavy rainfall, the road is turned into a swimming pool. Developing land, reduction and potential of serious incidents by aquaplaning vehicles colliding with consequential damage. In fact, an incident, fortunately with, I believe, light damage, occurred on Wednesday the 11th of December. I hope it is not a prelude to any further events. Could the Leader please refer this matter to the Cabinet Member for Highways as well?
Mr. Mayor, there's one issue that I've raised with the Cabinet Member for Highways since 2015 has been the issue of the M65 stretch that the County Council on. There's previous council resolutions on that I took to the County Council, had various meetings with the Cabinet Member for Highways and indeed the Leader of the County Council previously as well. And we've also written yesterday again to them to raise this issue. And the response that we've always had from the County Council is that the surface water isn't a problem, it's the drainage, and they'll clean the drainage once every 3 months. But clearly that is not working, and it's a sad thing for me to say, or will it take a serious accident on that stretch of the M65 before the County Council actually wake up and do something? Well, I will of course I've written to him yesterday, and I'm following this council meeting, right to the Cabinet Member yet again, but going off his past 3 years, I wouldn't hold too much hope.
Thank you, Question 4. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In consideration of the potential provision by the government of funding for Nelson from the Town Deal Scheme and the Future High Streets Fund of up to £50 million, what further proposals do you recommend to the Council in relation to investment in and promotion of the town centres in Colne, Barnoldswick, Briarfield and Earley?
Mr. Mayor, as the Council agrees and other colleagues are aware, Nelson was announced as one of the first 100 towns to be chosen by the government to receive town deal funding. Whilst we've yet to receive a single penny of that funding, which coincidentally we've now been told we have to bid into the pot to actually try and get something out, We're in the process of developing an investment plan. Colleagues will be aware that the Conservative Manifesto has suggested there will be more funding for more towns available soon. So the M65, once Councillor Turner's friend, County has sorted the aquaplaning out, will be awash with money coming up the M65 for Pendle. But until this further information is released by the government, it's impossible for me to advise Councillor Greaves in terms of how residents in Corn, Barnoldswick, Bradford and Eby could bid for any additional funding.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Witt, supplementary. Oh, Councillor Grimm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nelson is very clearly in need of a great deal of investment and a great deal of promotion in order to overcome the problems that it's got. But is it not the case that it is very odd that however much of this money comes under these two schemes, which have been floated as being a maximum of £25 million each, though perhaps less than that will actually come in the end, all for Nelson, that people in other parts of Pendle are asking fairly serious questions about, well, how is it that one town gets everything and the other towns appear to get nothing?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kevin Wright.
I've got a little bit of information that will then be followed by a question. And my little bit of information is that we've had full feedback from English Heritage about Cohen's bid. And we were told that all the ideas we had were excellent to proceed with, and all the evidence we provided about Cohen's was perfect. But the reason we didn't get the money was simply because we weren't, and this is the modern phrase that you hear all the time, shovel ready. So my question is, how would this council help Cone be shovel ready so that it can proceed with the good ideas that it has to improve the town?
Councillor Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would the Leader of the Council agree with me that a cleared site where development will be commenced in the new year on a new development of shops and residential accommodation is as shovel ready as you can get, and that it doesn't come better than that? My question, though, is around Barnoldswick and Colne, which did bid for £1 million or so each from the Heritage High Street Action Funding, and were signally unsuccessful. In terms of Earby, the MP had promised that he thought the town deal funding could help address flooding in Earby. Now, none of that has come to pass, and I think a lot of people, Barnoldswick, Colne, Earby, are very much disenchanted. Does the Leader agree with me that it's about time that this largesse from government should extend to other parts of Pendle than just Nelson?
Thank you. Councillor Asher.
My question to the Leader is exactly what Councillor Greaves has just said. Money, yes, we heard a big thing about money coming into Nelson, and obviously other areas of Pendle haven't received anything. I've been contacted by numerous residents saying that why is more money being invested in Briarfield as well? So obviously Briarfield is part of Pendle, so my question is, when will Briarfield receive some money?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of responding to Councillor Greaves, clearly this council is grateful for any money that we receive from anybody. But other towns he's mentioned, I mean, Nelson hasn't even had a penny of this money yet, and I'm starting to get a bit worried whether we will see that. But between 2010 and now, this council, this borough, suffered over £8 million worth of cuts, direct cuts to our funding. So if the government are really serious about addressing equality and fairness, the first thing that I'd ask the Prime Minister to do, and our Member of Parliament, is to reinstate that £8 million worth of cuts that we've had, so we can deliver those services back to the people across Pendle. In terms of Councillor Gordon Price talking about coal being shovel-ready, this administration has a proud record of working across this borough with everybody in every town, whether they're shovel-ready or not, to try and bid to get money in. And I think you will agree that, for example, an iconic site in the centre of Corn has only been delivered thanks to this council, this administration, working day and night to make sure that it gets off the ground and hopefully becomes a centrepiece for people in Corn. Councillor Whip and Councillor Ashcroft agree with you both 100%. Clearly, once Nelson gets the 50 million, sorry, I'll rephrase that. If Nelson gets the 50 million, or even before Nelson gets the 50 million, at every opportunity, I as council leader will argue for any additional funding to be ploughed into all parts of this borough, ranging from Bonolwick all the way through to Regley.
Thank you, Councillor Redline. Question 5, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the leader know if the outstanding rent payable by Live Lounge Bars Limited in respect of the use of the Lesser Muni has been paid?
Councillor Redline.
Mr. Mayor, I'm personally not aware if the rent has been paid or not. It's a matter for the Leisure Trust. And I would ask the colleagues that are on the Leisure Trust board to ask that question direct to the Chief Executive. As of today, I'm not able to answer the question from Councillor Greaves whether the rent has been paid or whether it wasn't paid.
Thank you, Cameron. Councillor Greaves.
Will the leader agree that the reason, or one of the reasons why the arrangement, the management agreement to occupy the Lesser Muni was terminated by the Leisure Trust was that at that stage no rent had been paid at all? My understanding is that of the 4 months in which it was occupied, there was free rent in the first month in lieu of work done, decorations and so on, and rent was payable in the following 3 months. No rent had been paid, so they were kicked out. Will the leader confirm that was the case?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not able to agree with that specific point, but I generally do not know. I'm aware, and we had previous discussions about the then former leader of this council having been the director of Live Lounge Bars Limited, and what the arrangement was. Indeed, was one of the reasons that the agreement was terminated. Rent not being paid after the rent-free period. I generally do not know the answer to that, so I think it'd be remiss of me to try and defend Live Lounge Bars here by saying that they're left of their own accord. So Councillor Green may well be right, but I'm not in a position to agree or disagree at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 6. Question 6, Councillor Green.
Sorry, I thought it was really supplementary, but we didn't jump in. Does the leader know of any outstanding bills that were due to payment by Live Lounge Bills Limited that have now been submitted to Pendle Leisure Trust since the Lesser Muni was vacated by that company? And does he know what action is being taken to ensure that these costs are being paid by them and not by the trust?
Thank you very much indeed.
Mr. Mayor, I will write and ask the Chief Executive of the Leisure Trust that specific question tomorrow, because I'm not aware in terms of what the arrangement was in terms of the outstanding bills, but the manner in which Live Lounge Bars allegedly closed down would beg the question that is it similar to a tenant leaving without paying the bills, and in fact who would then pick up the tab? Would it be the Leisure Trust? And then in return would it be the taxpayers of this borough, because obviously we subsidise the Leisure Trust year upon year. So it's a valid question. I don't have the answer this evening, but as soon as I get the response I'll circulate it to all councillors.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green.
Thank you. It was certainly, Mr. Mayor, widely reported at the time of the closure of the pub, if that's what it was, that the reason it closed was that they'd run out of beer because they were not paying the suppliers of the beer, and therefore they hadn't got any more, and therefore it shut. And there are some very disturbing rumours of other bills and requirements to pay people that have not been done. However, I will rest it at this stage and wait for the further information from the Leader of the Council in relation to bills which have been submitted by utilities, for example, to the Leisure Trust and which have either been paid or are outstanding.
Councillor Whip.
Mr Mayor, and Councillor Iqbal in part has already answered this. Does he agree with me that given the subsidy paid by Pendle Council to the Leisure Trust, that any funds which are required to be used to discharge any obligations entered into by Live Lounge Bars Limited have a direct impact on the funding which this council has to put into the Leisure Trust in order for them to fund the gap between their income and their expenditure?
Mr Mayor, I agree with Councillor Witt, because I think what would concern all councillors sat in this room and the taxpayers of this borough is that if we were providing a subsidy to the Leisure Trust to provide leisure services to the people of this borough, if some of that money, whether it be a penny, a pound or anything greater, would be used to write off or repay bad debts owed by people that were renting, whether it be the Leicester Union or other parts of the Leisure Trust's estate, that would greatly concern me, and I'm sure it would concern all councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Question 7, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On the same subject, does the Leader know what costs have been incurred by the Pendle Leisure Trust in relation to redecoration of the Leicester Uni and any other matters since it was vacated by Live Lounge Bars Limited, and whether action is being taken so that the company redeems those costs?
Mr Mayor, in terms of the Leisure Trust, when they took over the Leicester Uni that was vacated by Live Lounge Bars Limited, as far as I'm aware, there have been no costs incurred as of yet, because nothing has been done to the Leicester Uni. But no doubt, once the Leisure Trust wants to do something at the Leicester Uni, then clearly there will be costs that they will incur. But we're advised that they've not incurred any costs at this stage.
I'm grateful for that answer, and I think we perhaps will look into it further. Mr Mayor, does the Leader understand that there is considerable disquiet at the position in which the former Leader of this council was able to take over a council-owned property to run as a pub, and via the Leisure Trust, but nevertheless a council-owned property in which he was in, I'm not suggesting that anything illegal went on, but he was in a position to use his information and knowledge about the position in order to do that, and then walk away from it without so much as, well, without so much as paying his rent anyhow. And that is the Leader aware that the company which the Leader of this council set up in order to carry out this operation appears to be still in existence, according to records on the internet from Companies House, and this is, the whole situation is one which reeks of sleaze and rebounds upon this council, that it was a Leader of this council, that not just any person out there, who sets up a tin pot company, a tin bob company, to do this work, and then is able apparently simply to walk away from obligations and debts when he can't make a do of it.
Councillor Wood.
Mr Mayor, referring back to the original question here, the redecoration, could I ask if the Leader of the Council is aware of the smell of fresh paint in the Lesser Muni, and does he agree with me that the smell of fresh paint certainly indicates an amount of redecoration. And is he aware that the appearance of the Lesser Muni is considerably different to what it was when live lounge bars were operating the bar from there?
Thank you, Councillor Aitken.
Just in response to Councillor Whip, I did say that as far as I was aware, I'm not in a position to spell anything at the moment. George Brook. In terms of Councillor Greaves raising some serious concern, he's raised these consistently at various council meetings, and indeed, when the former leader of the council was here before me, those questions were asked and satisfactory answers were not provided. The questions that were asked by two political groups on this council, satisfactory answers were not given, in my opinion. He's no longer on the council to answer the questions that are being put to him. But clearly that may reflect badly on future councillors and council leaders, that if the leader of the council, or councillors for that matter, use their position to gain any favours from external companies who have dealings with the council, that is wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Question 8, Councillor Green.
Mr Mayor, thank you. What contacts have been made with Pendle Council in the past year by the government or Transport for the North, or by consultants working on their behalf or on behalf of Transport for the North, in connection with the provision of a Cone and Villages bypass from the M65 to the A59 in the direction of Skipton?
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Aitken.
Mr Mayor, despite numerous letters from myself, no contact has been made by the government or Transport. Indeed, at the Executive's insistence, he on behalf of this council met Transport for the North back in September of this year, and some group leaders will be aware that following the meeting with the MP for Pendle, we were told that Highways England are undertaking a study to the options for the east-west connectivity beyond the end of the M65. But we're not party to any working group. We've not been asked to give any evidence as part of the study. And as far as I'm aware, based on the information that I've had, is that the outcome of the study sometime in spring. Now, how long spring is, I don't know, but I would have expected certainly an invitation as leader of the council or the chief executive to appear before those people that are doing the study, because we can argue the case for the A56 buildings bypass because we live here. You know, we work here, and who knows it better than us, but for some reason nobody's bothered to approach us.
Councillor Aitken. Councillor Green.
Mr Mayor, I am very surprised by that answer. The way in which I asked the question and the answer that the leader gave, it probably sounds to some people that it was a patsy question and that I was setting him up to give that answer. That is actually not the case. I did not, when I put down this question this afternoon, I did not know what the answer was, and I assumed that there must have been some contacts. I apologise for the fact that I'd forgotten it was Highways England that was supposed to be conducting this study, which was announced by the local Member of Parliament. And I should have put that in the question, but I got it answered anyway. Is it not the case? Okay, we're the Tin Pot District Council as far as some of those people up there are concerned, and the County Council is the Highways Authority. It will be very interesting to know what the answer to that question, a similar question, of the Highways Authority would be. Have Lancashire County Council been involved, and have there been had discussions and so on? And perhaps county councillors here can ask that question at Preston. But is it not the case that we are the development authority, we're the planning authority? This council has been, rightly or wrongly, campaigning for a Colne-Fulridge bypass and then a Villages bypass and a route through to the A59 for as long as I can remember, and as some people will point out, that's rather a long time. And it is astonishing that none of these organisations think to come back to this council. It is disgraceful, is it not? I'll ask a question. That in response to what the leader says are numerous letters, they haven't even bothered to reply and come back to us on this. This is astonishing, and it's something that perhaps we ought to discuss in more appropriate forums at greater length as soon as possible, to make sure that the views of this authority representing the people of Pendle are fed into this, and we're not just left waiting to see what people on high come up with.
Mr. Mayor, I'm aware that Lancashire County Council have been involved, but they have chosen not to involve us as the District Council. Because I also believe that the Villagers Bypass is a multi-generational opportunity for this area, because there's a number of council establishments that have been campaigning for decades, but it's not for the want of trying that this council is trying to get a seat at any table for anybody that listens to us. But for some reason, doors are not being opened to us, but we will continue to keep on trying and shouting.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much. Councillors, can we move on now then to item 8 on the agenda, the report by the leader on the work of the Policy and Resources Committee?
Happy to move it and take any questions anyone has.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Elliott House, page 4, final bullet point. Mr. Mayor, first of all, may I extend my apologies, because on looking back, I see that this matter was discussed quite liberally at Policy and Resources and at this council in June, but I was unavailable at the time, and I do apologise that I didn't get you up to that stage. However, Mr. Mayor, I do remember over the last 2 years, discussions on Elliott House have always tended to revive around the fact of Barnfield having an obligation to retake possession of this premises at our request in or before March of next year. Quite a substantial 7-figure sum comes to my mind. I now see that we've accepted a bid of 224,000 from the Light Beam Academy. Can I ask, Mr. Mayor, and my concern with this is, can we be assured there is no involvement at all of any member or any close associate of any member of this council to any management or operation of Light Beam? And can I also ask that the community room that is scheduled to be available at Light Beam, well, at Nelson House when they take it over, will be made available to all people of all denominations. And I notice, and I'm pleased to see, that we are being able to store units and items at Elliott House free of charge after the completion and the transfer of this. Can we have an assurance, Mr. Mayor, that this storage is for an indefinite period of time and is not time limited? And if it is time limited, how long is it time limited for? And can we be assured that we can continue to use it effectively to make this cost effective? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We're going to take all the questions at one go. So, Councillor D, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I pick up where Councillor Turner left off with Elliott House? And could I just point out that we haven't sold it for 22,400. There is a typo on the sheet. It is in fact £224,000. And it's my view, which I expressed at Parliament's Resources, that we have got a very good deal. We have got a very good deal because we are obtaining far more than the £30,000, which was the option if Barnfield had taken on the property. And we are securing a good community use for a property which, if it remained empty in Nelson, could end up like the old education offices next door, which are going to rack and ruin, which are a blight on the centre of Nelson, and which indeed pose a danger and a drugs haunt for the centre, which we do not want to see replicated with Elliot House. So my comment on Elliot House is what a bloody good do. Secondly, Mr Mayor, can I refer to the West Craven flood defence and resilience, and first of all congratulate our engineers section who are supervising the very last link in the new £400,000 culvert for the protection of the Gill Meadows estate. And I know that ward councillors will be as delighted as I that the culvert, the new culvert there, will be ready and working in time for the 4th anniversary of the Boxing Day floods of 2015. And I am absolutely delighted with the contribution by our staff in, first of all, getting the funding, and secondly, getting the scheme carried out, and through very difficult circumstances, getting it completed in the way that they have. In terms of Earby, could I ask if we have had any response from the MP regarding the £3.3 million shortfall in funding for the further phase of work in Earby? And indeed, what response have we had from the chairman of the Yorkshire Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, who lives in Ilkley? And finally, Mr Mayor, can I comment on district enforcement? And could I ask the Leader of the Council to confirm that the company has have noticed that their contract will be terminated, subject to discussion on possible new terms. And can I just repeat something that I advertised at the Policy and Resources Committee, which is initiative by Keep Britain Tidy, which is flicking blue murder, and it's an exhortation for people to bin the butt. So we're trying to stop cigarette ends getting into the wastewater stream and ultimately into the oceans, where they persist for a long time. And I would just ask the question of the Leader of the Council: does he agree that such initiatives and getting through to the hearts and minds and souls of people are a lot more effective than fining £1 million and taking that £1 million out of the local economy in Pendle and getting everybody's backs up?
Councillor Tomley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My first point is to thank the Policy and Resources Committee for approving the recommendations of the West Craven Area Committee on the Pendle Sculpture Trail. I have visited all the sculptures myself yesterday, and I was very happy with the way they look. I'm sure there will be a great investment in Barnoldswick, in Leckley Park, for years to come. My second point, which is a question, is on the Pendle ICT strategy regarding Office 365, which was agreed to be delivered to all members last year. Now, I know of a couple of members around the room which have had to buy copies of Office 365 because it has not been provided for by this council. And I'm pretty sure it's already being paid for, so I'd like to know what is going on with that. Thank you.
Any more for any more? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple. On transfer of services and facilities to town and parish councils, page 1. Not the bush shelters, I want to talk. Well, I'll ask a question about the bush shelters. Can I ask what guarantees Lancashire County Council have given about what they're going to do with the bush shelters, particularly those along the main road in Burnley Road in Combe, which are in a thoroughly disgraceful condition? On the same item, can I ask, following the successful transfer of Alkincoats Park to Combe Town Council, which took place today, and the information we've had that Barrowford Park is well on the way, can I ask which parks are now outstanding and what is the position with each of them in terms of getting an early transfer? Secondly, on page 2, disposal of land at End Street, Combe, which is a very local waterside issue, but nevertheless important. The report says we agreed to declare this land surplus to requirements and authorise the Chief Executive to negotiate and agree terms for the sale of the land for residential development by private treaty with the purchasers of the council's land opposite. Now, I know who it is and what's going on and so on, but I'm not going to talk about the individual firm concerned in this meeting, but the company concerned purchased 3 plots of land from Lancashire County Council about a year ago now, I think, all 3 of which are in the same area on the sort of bottom and side of Bunkers Hill. A fairly large site on Bankfield Street and a small, what had been a pretty tatty council-owned amenity area, I suppose you could call it that. It had been landscaped some time ago when houses were knocked down, decades ago. And then a tiny piece of land, which was an oddity really, along Collingwood Street. And they were, and I've spoken to the owners of the company, and they were quite keen to get on and develop. But they are having problems because the Japanese knotweed, which was rampant on the former council-owned garage site adjacent to the land at Bankfield Street, has not been eradicated properly. I mean, a lot of it has, most of it has, but it's reappeared. And some of it, I think, has gone to their land. So they are in difficulty about developing that, having bought the land. Those 3 plots of land are now in a pretty tatty condition. As a result of representations made to the company, I think by council officers and certainly by myself, they did tidy up some of it when they first got it, but a year later it's had the growth of most of the year and it is getting pretty tatty and unpleasant. And it has got sort of builders' railings, whatever they call it, surrounding it. This is on and adjacent to a residential area, so it's not good. What is now happening is the council is transferring a piece of land next to the tiny plot I was talking about on Collingwood Street, selling it to them. I'm not sure whether that's been sold to them yet or not, perhaps the leader can tell me. And now it's been agreed that a further plot across the street, across End Street, where there used to be a chapel, which was pulled down by this council some decades ago, it's being transferred to them again. I am aware that, I'm sorry this is going on a bit, but I am aware that they have been looking for land, or the council has been looking for land for them in other areas in other parts of town, in order to make a developable collection of pieces of land, and that resulted in a certain uproar among some residents who discovered people going and saying they were going to take over their gardens. And you can imagine. So my question is, what is happening to sort out what started off as being quite a constructive set of proposals with what seems to be a very reputable, fairly local company, another Lancashire town developer, which all seems to be going wrong, and in particular, what is happening to get them to tidy the land they already own at Bunkers Hill and to avoid this other land being turned into the same sort of wilderness which the land they already own already exists.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Wood.
Unfortunately, I'm completely lost. But can I just talk about something through the Lancashire Healthy Weight programme that we appear to have signed up to? Is that all right?
Yeah, can we ask the question?
I'll ask the question. It's not really about weight, but it's about children receiving the flu jab, and it's been widely advertised that not enough uptake has been going on with particularly 2 to 3 year olds. So rather than me talk about it, explain it all, what I propose to do is to post all the information on social media, and hopefully to ask, the question is, will all the councillors share the post that I will put up when I get home, if we ever get home. So that's all I want to say. But it's so important that these children have this flu jab to save them from getting the flu, which is a much bigger strain than it ever used to be, and also to protect their families and other people around them. So I just want people to share that information.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on Councillor Lord's point about the flu jab, I'll be more than happy to share her post as soon as she puts it up. I would encourage all of the colleagues to do so. In terms of Councillor Greaves' 3 points about health shelters, the park and X Street gone, the Chief Executive will write to you tomorrow with a response on all three on my behalf. Councillor Tom Whip's point about Office 365, I wasn't aware of the point that you raised, but we will look into that and come back to you with a response as well. Councillor David Whip asking about a response from the Member of Parliament about the EV situation. You'd be surprised to hear that no, we've not had a response. In terms of a meeting with Yorkshire Water and other agencies, there is one being provisionally penciled in for sometime in January, which of course you will be notified about. In terms of Councillor Kent Turner, we spoke quite a little while ago about Elliot House. If I could just correct him on a few points. The item wasn't discussed at full council in June. It's always been discussed at Policy and Resources. Maybe he's confusing the point with when he voted to declare it surplus last year, when he was in control. But the option with Barnfield was a one-sided option for this council to exercise, not for Barnfield to exercise with us. In terms of the offer that the Policy and Resources Committee accepted on behalf of the council is a significant increase of what potentially Barnfield could have been forced to pay for. So let me assure you of that the council has got the £224,000, not £22,400. In terms of the community room offer and the storage issue, the Policy and Resources Committee delegated authority to Mr Lanston as the Chief Executive to negotiate the final terms, and I have every confidence in his ability to ensure that the Council gets the best deal possible. In terms of District Enforcement, Councillor Whip, termination has been served on. District Enforcement has agreed at the Policy and Resources Committee. There's a meeting, as again we agreed at the Policy and Resources Committee, to be arranged with them sometime in January, to which all three groups will be invited. And then a report will go to the Policy and Resources Committee in February for a final decision to be made by the Council whether we continue with the termination or we look to rescind the termination if District Enforcement and prepared to take on board some of the comments raised by elected members and people of this borough.
Can I hold temporarily before we start item 9? Because the Chief Financial Officer in section 151 last dean leaves the room. Thank you very much. Then item 9, we consider the attached report from the Corporate Director. Councillor Acorn.
Mr. Mayor, the report is self-explanatory, but there was discussion between all three group leaders on this issue, and the group leaders came to a unanimous view that we would recommend the recommendation set out in the report to council to accept, because clearly the post of section 151 officer is important. The reasons why we're recommending set out in the report. I'm happy to take any questions on behalf of the group leaders if need be. So I move the recommendation.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Witt.
Can I second the proposal, Mr. Mayor? I do think the reasons for doing this are self-explanatory and sensible in all the circumstances, and I have no hesitation in recommending it to the council.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, first of all, can I ask that we extend our thanks and best wishes to Mrs. Guinness for attention that she has done while she's been with us. And I'm pleased that, yes, it is for a 12-month trial period or a temporary period that the Chief Executive is taking Section 151. I did actually advocate that 12 months ago, well, over 12 months ago, when we were talking about the situation before we took on Mrs. Guinness. Can I also ask, Mr. Mayor, I look at the new combination of posts that are taking place with the loss of Mrs. Guinness, and I can appreciate that it is fair and reasonable that the Chief Executive, in view of his responsibilities, his onerous responsibilities, should be compensated for the additional work that is taking place. I note that the Corporate Director has been very generous to give us another day of his freedom per week to come and supplement the difficulties that are going to be undertaken. And I also note the benefit that the senior account manager that is left will be trained up as deputy Section 151 with the additional work that he will be needing to take. But I also see that there is a place for another one full-time employee. Now, where he will fit into the accountancy structure, whether it will be at the lower level or at the higher level, is something that isn't quite described in there. So may I ask, Mr. Mayor, perhaps the leader can satisfy me that the final outcome, when we're talking of this in 12 months' time, that the final outcome of salaries that are being paid to senior managers are in fact at least not more than we are currently paying, and are certainly not more than we were paying 2 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The gross salaries.
Councillor Acorn.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in terms of Councillor Taylor's point about the recruitment in accountancy, I can assure you that it's somebody at a junior level. Of course, this council has a proud record of recruiting people at junior level and then promoting them whilst they can get on the knowledge of some senior people. But I think this is an apt opportunity. He thanks Susan Guinness for her services. I think we'd like to, on behalf of the council, I think, thank every single member of this council in terms of employees who do a sterling job in terms of the services that they provide in very difficult circumstances at the moment. But group leaders discussed this in detail, and like I said, the recommendation is one that we need unanimously.
Thank you, Karen. Can we move straight to a vote on this? It has been proposed, it has been seconded. Can we accept the report, note the report, and accept the recommendations as set out on the front page? All those in favour? 10 aye. Those against? Abstentions? No? Unanimous vote. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Can we recall our chief executive then?
You haven't been at pies, has it? Has it been at the mince pies?
Well, it might have been.
So we asked. Check his breath. Is there crumbs on his tie?
Item 10 on the agenda then, council tax base for the year 2021. You do have a report, Councillor Rickard.
Can I have to move the recommendation?
Councillor Webb?
Can I second that, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. No other speakers on this particular debate. Can we go straight to the vote then? Can we note the report and accept the recommendations? Oh, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, looking at this plan where the councillors are...
All those in favour of accepting the report and acting the recommendation? Those against? Any abstentions? None, unanimous vote. Thank you very much indeed. Item 11 on the agenda, the electoral review. Councillor Rickard.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is set out on the sheet, but colleagues will have had a copy of this. There is actually a typo error and a mathematical error. If you look at the number of councillors, it says Whitefield and Walton 2, that can actually read 3. And once you change it to 3, it comes to 33. But as colleagues are aware, the Boundary Commission delayed their final recommendation, which only came out this morning. And as a result of that, the recommendation to council is that you delegate authority to the all-party governance working group, who will meet in January to finalise the polling station review. I move that as a recommendation.
Thank you kindly. Councillor Greaves.
Yeah. Can I second that, Mr. Mayor? And just repeat, the Whitefield and Walden line, it's not just the number of councillors, the whole line is garbage. So, how they do that, I don't know. But somebody ought to tell them, just in case anybody takes this seriously. Can I just say, as chair of the governance working party, it is very important that because we've got new ward boundaries, and some of them quite substantial, with whole polling districts moving from one old ward to a new old ward, that everybody looks at the polling districts and the polling places and puts forward any changes that they think would be sensible. It is my view that in Cone, for example, there are a number of changes that should be considered to make it more convenient for people to go to polling stations and for the system to work. But this can obviously all be discussed. But it's not up to me to say what should happen. I think all councillors should look at their patches, in fact the whole area, and come up with what they think will be sensible. So can I second?
Councillor Ashcroft?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher?
I just wanted to confirm what Councillor Greaves said. And I was at a polling station on Thursday down at Ball Grove. It was pitch black. You couldn't see where you were going. I think that's quite treacherous for people trying to get down there to vote. And if it be I said, no one would have turned out to vote at that polling booth. So can we make that?
Yeah.
Councillor Aslam, do you want to comment on this since you... Thank you very much indeed. Can we therefore accept the proposal as written in the pink sheet? that the council has recommended to delegate authority to the all-party governance working group to approve and the completed review. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Those against? Abstention? None. Thank you very much indeed. Item 12, the Barrackwood Neighbourhood Plan. Councillor Rickman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If colleagues are aware, the referendum was held back in November on the Barrackwood Neighbourhood Plan. The results are there for you, details are there for you as well. Happy to do the recommendation.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I second your recommendation and say I'm pleased that the Barrackwood Neighbourhood Plan is now up and running. It's been a long time coming. It should have been here 18 months ago, but we unfortunately were delayed a little. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Shall we have a proposer and a seconder?
I'll second it.
Sure. Okay. Can we therefore vote to accept the recommendations of the report to make or adopt the Barrackwood Neighbourhood Plan and to agree the publication of the Council's decision statement? All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? No? Thank you very much indeed. Unanimous. Can we therefore move on now therefore to notices of motion? Oh, sorry. Disabled March on here. Item 13. The scrutiny working group on drug problems in Pendle. Councillor Newman, please, as chairman of the
Thank you, Mr.
panel.
The Community Safety Partnership and Pendle Council have got a role to play in this, a big role. The local Corporate District Working Group and the Community Safety Partnership, we meet every month with the police and talk about the problems of Pendle and surrounding area. And I personally think that the local problem is better sorted by local people and a local organisation. In Cone, we have individual councillors like Alice Mann and our Deputy Mayor, Mr. Butler, who play a big role in this by cleaning up drugs and drug paraphernalia which is scattered around. And I to say, we must hold it. Our police have been very hampered by cutbacks. But now they've got a new government, let's hope this will be reversed. Drugs have a very serious consequence for everybody, not just the people that take them, but for everyone of us that sit here tonight. There's crime, and there is also a very influx of people in hospitals that have drug-related problems, taking up spaces that we could use in other ways. You may not know this, but Peter Myers state one drugs and get any drug that is selling more. But we don't prescribe this. And on another note, I don't have any experience of drugs, apart from a small tale. I must tell you that a couple of years ago, some of my friends found some drugs in the dry stone wall, which were cannabis, and they ended up with a report that they were staggering around the field. So we had to send to the vet. The vet came, did some tests, and said the intake of cannabis has got through the blood system, making them hazy, dizzy. So I'm only thankful that the vets bill wasn't too big, and I'm glad that they didn't become addicts because I couldn't afford it. We've all got to play a part in this, whoever we are. And hopefully Pendle Council and the government will give more funding to this problem so that we can all be safe and surrounding ourselves. Thank you very much.
You're therefore proposing that we accept the recommendation?
Accept the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to say that and thank you very much, young man. Unfortunately, you have to look at reality, and no matter how much money or effort you put into this situation, you're not going to solve it. It's just one of those things that we have to rather contain. We'll never get rid of it. It's just not feasible. Around the Colne area, I take a very active role. I'm a first responder. So on social media, they can see the needle. I've done a little bit of a course. I go out and pick the needle up and take it to the local chemist, which gets rid of it. And it is calming down. In October, I picked up 38 needles. In November 16, and this month 4. So lots of reasons for this, the weather, and two of the main people who we know who they are. I mean, I speak to them and I've offered them the little boxes to put the things in, but you know, it's just not for them. So one of them's moved away, and one is in rehab. Hence the number of needles I've picked up this month. What I would like to do, social media is a wonderful thing, or it could be a bad thing, but in this case it's wonderful. But what I want to do most of all is applaud Pendle Borough Council for the really quick response that they did. There's a phone number now, you ring up and they come out, they're really good. So I want to applaud the Planning Department of this council for their extremely quick response. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Rutherford. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Witt, do you wish to comment?
If I may, Mr Mayor, as you know, I chair the Community Safety Partnership here in Pendle, and the impact of drugs use does take up a considerable part of our effort and our energy, and its wider substance misuse. The greatest damage, I have to say, is done by alcohol, and the damage that alcohol causes both to people's individual health and to the wider community through some of the activity that excessive alcohol consumption causes. Because of its prevalence, is the biggest issue that we have to face, both from a point of criminality, antisocial behaviour and public and individual health. But the role of much harder drugs is very damaging too, and I'd like to pay tribute to the people who offer treatment for substance misusers. We've got Inspire, who have been up and down with the facilities and services that they can offer because of the way in which they're contracted, but provide excellent services for people who recognise they have got a problem with substance misuse. And I would encourage anybody, and I'm not looking at anybody in this chamber, but you never know. I think anybody who recognises that they have got a problem to turn up at the treatment centres that they have, and they are community based, but there will be a permanent presence within Nelson, to turn up and refer themselves for their services, because they are very, very effective. I do know quite a lot of people on the road to recovery, and over the years I have seen many people who are on the steps away from drug and substance misuse, and people have a valuable contribution to make to society, to their families, to themselves, and it's that first step of recognising the addiction that they have and the need for them to escape that addiction. So I don't know if there's anybody left upstairs. This will be broadcast to the wider world. My single message would be, please, 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 if you are on the wrong road, there is a road to recovery. Please make use of it.
So we have a proposer and a seconder. Can we therefore note the report and accept the recommendations made by the working group to council as listed on the back page of the report that you have in front of you? Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? No? Unanimous again. Thank you very much indeed, councillor. Can we move on then to item 14 on the agenda, which is the Disabled Facilities Grant? And I would remind councillors that this will be a recorded vote. Councillor Rickard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This report went to the Policy Resources Committee meeting in November. We considered the report, but as an additional recommendation to Council, we recommended that you approve a £25,000 discretionary grant from the existing DFD fund. This is, for those that may or may not be aware, the Council has a cap of £30,000 per grant. There are occasions where, for example, a grant may cost 31, 32, just be slightly over. And that is a shame that if that particular family or that particular individual loses or has to wait until that shortfall is made up from, potentially from family, friends or other sources. So Policy and Resources are recommending that you allocate a fund from this year's budget. We will look to review it for 2020-21 and delegate. We said that we would delegate authority to officers to make the decision in terms of which discretionary grants get that additional funding. So I would recommend to Council that you vote for this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Webb.
Second this, Mr. Mayor. Could I just point out that it's a £25,000 discretionary grant fund, not a single £25,000 discretionary grant, and it's a bit misleading on the agenda papers. As the Leader of the Council has pointed out, the proposal is that small discretionary grants would be provided where necessary in order for work to go ahead. Mr. Mayor, this is a sensible suggestion. As people know, I would like to see a wholesale reform of Disabled Facilities Grant, the funding that's available for them, and the way in which the system operates. This is a very tiny step in terms of that reform, but a very welcome one. So I second.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, sure. So we go straight to a vote then, since the vote is indicated. It's a name vote, so leave it up to the chair.
So if you're in favour of the motion, say for. If you are against, say against. Adam. For. Adams. For. Ali.
For.
Anna.
For.
Ansar. For. Arshad Mohammed. Ashraf. For. Aslam.
For.
Butterworth.
For.
Carroll. For. Carter.
For.
Clegg.
For.
Coburn Price.
For.
Crossley. For. Fletcher.
4.
Foxley M.
4.
Foxley P.
4.
Goforth.
4.
Greaves. 4. Harif. 4. Hartley.
4.
Iqbal M.
4.
Iqbal Y.
4.
Leonti. 4. Lord.
4.
McCollum.
4.
McGowan.
4.
Mills.
4.
Newman. 4. Nixon.
4.
Safi.
4.
Shaw. Tennant.
4.
Turner. 4. Wall. 4. Wing D.
4.
Wing T.
4.
Winks.
4.
Thank you very much indeed.
My apologies. Shazad.
Yeah, 4.
Item 15 then, councillors, notices of motion. Item 15A on the agenda, motion on fireworks, to be moved by Councillor Sarah Coleman-Wright.
I adore a firework display as much as the next woman, and I think you'd all agree with me that recently, in the last few years in Pendle, the amount of fireworks, the number of nights we hear fireworks, the sound of the fireworks, the times of the fireworks, it's got out of control. So Councillor Foxley and I received this suggested motion from a Woolswick resident, Mrs. Elizabeth Lane, and it struck me as eminently sensible. It is not heavy-handed, it is fair, and were we to get, as a council, to get involved in trying to make this happen, we would be improving the situation immeasurably while still allowing people like me and all the people that love fireworks to enjoy them appropriately.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Foxley.
I just wish to second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to the proposal, which is Council note to delete the words that we've got. Council notes the terms of the resolution put forward and refers this matter to Policy and Resources Committee for further consideration with a view to bringing this back to the council meeting in March. And I do so, Mr Mayor, because worthy though the aims of this motion are, I do not believe that they are comprehensive enough to get to grips with the issues that we have with problematic fireworks across the borough. To my mind, and I don't say this is chaired by my group, but to my mind, we ought only to have organised fireworks displays. There ought not to be indiscriminate fireworks going off left, right and centre. The sale of fireworks should be much more tightly regulated than they are at present. And the issue about looking after people's pets, worthy though it is, doesn't go anywhere towards addressing the issues of unregulated letting off of fireworks during the middle of the night. So although I have great sympathy with what Councillor Coleman-Price and Councillor Margaret Foxley are putting forward, I think that we need to have a much more comprehensive set of proposals, and that we ought to be asking government to legislate nationally to ensure that the use of fireworks is far more properly regulated than it is currently. And I'd like to go beyond what's on the agenda paper tonight. We have discussed this at Policy and Resources. It has been discussed by the Community Safety Partnership. I think we're at danger of of going off at half cock, if you can forgive me the pun there about bangs and fireworks and all that sort of stuff. So, Mr Mayor, it's to refer it to Policy and Resources. Let's have a sensible discussion. Let's come forward to the council meeting in March with a sensible set of proposals which are all encompassing, and we can ask government to take action in the round rather than just picking bits of it. I move.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wood. Do you have a seconder for that amendment?
I'll second it. Can I speak? Yes. Well, this comes to this council every year, and has done for years, and we've never really got any further with it than just discussing it here. So hopefully we can this time. But the attitude of some of the public is, well, basically, I don't give a damn, I'm going to do it anyway. And, you know, to somebody like me at my age, that's brought up in the 50s and the 60s, you know, if you put something on social media, they say, oh, you know, were you never a child, or did you? Well, yes, but it was always done right then. And the thing that I was concerned about this time was that it fell in the middle of the week. So people, like the call, do it in the middle of the week. People were having it the weekend before, so we had all the fireworks and bonfire night, because they couldn't do it on, I think it was a Wednesday, they had it the following week. And then they followed on with another week, and it wasn't just in the evening. There was terrific loud bangs, like at 3 o'clock in the morning. What's all that about? You know, so people do have to do it differently, they really do. And this, you know, bonfire, as many of you will remember, when it was the 5th of November, it was the 5th of November, and that's when you had your bonfire. You didn't have it any other day. You didn't have it for a fortnight or well over a fortnight. So, you know, hopefully we can try and do something to get this a bit more regulated than it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the crux of the matter is that fireworks go on far too long and they're used for other occasions, not just bonfire night. We find that they're being used for weddings and various other things, and the disturbance that we get from them is upsetting quite a lot of people in Pendle and elsewhere. And I think that we need some government legislation to get the job sorted out without having to come back to it every year and talk about it.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ashram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This issue regarding fireworks, Mr. Mayor, it's not just happening obviously around bonfire, it's all year round. And in Briarfield or in Nelson, these sort of areas, it's every night, every weekend, it's every month, you know. And to be quite honest, I wholeheartedly agree with the motion here. However, with what Councillor Rick has said, I think we need more oomph on this actual motion so we can move it forward, because to be quite honest, it's very, very serious and it's deteriorating. I need to get a grasp on it ASAP.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Foxley.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree that we should move forward on this. I'm not convinced that should amount to moving it back, to refer it back to Policy and Resources Committee. I think what we have in front of us here tonight is a proposal which is pragmatic and deliverable. I think if we over-egg it and over-demand, we risk very seriously the prospect of achieving absolutely nothing. As Councillor Lords has said, this has come to this chamber a number of times, a number of years in the past, and nothing's been achieved at all. We had an opportunity, I believe, tonight to actually achieve something.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green? Sorry, Councillor Turner first. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Green. Mr. Mayor, we've talked about fireworks. It is not just for bonfire night, November that we talk of. People use fireworks throughout the other 364 days of the year in celebration. I listened to the comments of fireworks at 3 o'clock in the morning. That is, in fact, contrary to public order anyway, and should be referred at that matter. May I therefore suggest that we are now coming to a wonderful celebratory time of the year, where we may well see more fireworks. If we could actually pass this motion tonight, Mr. Mayor, we could actually put under the record our efforts to try and maintain and look after the evidence of our residents and also their pets. The most important thing is that there's far too many dogs and pets that are severely distraught by the number of fireworks that are being played. I would certainly concur with the original motion that has been put forward, and will be voting against the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think there's any real difference of principle here. It's just that some of us want to do things which will have some practical effect in as quickly as possible and not just expressing an opinion. Now, there are 4 bullet points here, and I would ask, I've not discussed it with my colleague Councillor Whip, but it seems that one of them could be done straight away, and there's no problem about that, and that is the 3rd one, writing to the UK government asking them to introduce legislation to limit the maximum noise level of fireworks. I think that could be done straight away, so what I would suggest to my colleague here is that when he says to remove all the existing wording and simply to note that it's been put forward, is to leave that one in. I think the Chief Executive is giving some technical procedural advice there. Good luck to him. On the others, quite honestly, the first bullet point, to require all public firework displays within the local authority boundaries to be advertised in advance of the event, I'm not sure what powers we have to require that should happen. Perhaps we do, perhaps we don't, but it's the kind of thing where actually we need a technical report from an officer saying this is the power you've got, this is what you can do, this is what you might try and do on a voluntary basis, but I think the way that local authorities are supposed to take rational, deliberative decisions, that requires a report first. The second one, I'm all in favour of actively promoting a public awareness campaign. That will cost some money, it requires some resource, exactly what it would involve, who would it be aimed at, would it go through schools, however it would go. And again, I think it needs a report that the Policy and Resources Committee can consider and come up with something really good and practical that will last. So I'm not trying to rubbish this motion at all. I'm saying it needs to be done in a way which is really effective. And then finally, to encourage local suppliers of fireworks to stop quieter fireworks. I mean, we know that Sainsbury's in Cone anyway, perhaps Sainsbury's generally, has stopped stocking fireworks. Yeah. If we want to campaign with suppliers of fireworks to encourage them to do things, the questions I ask is, and I don't know the answers, what system is there for licensing the supply of fireworks, the sale of fireworks? Is there a system? What powers have we got there? Perhaps they're not very good, but at least that ought to go to the committee in order to consider what we can do legally and what perhaps then we can go beyond the legalities in encouraging people. There are perfectly reputable shops sell fireworks in a reputable way. I don't want to name any particular shops that I think are less reputable in terms of what they sell and how they sell it and so on. I would simply say there's a shop at the back of Knox Lane I would like to see closed down. But we may not have the power to do that. But do we have the power to inspect? Do we have the power to work out to check who they're selling to? How would we do this? That kind of thing, I think, needs further information. Therefore, I think we're trying to be positive and practical, rather than pass a motion which, in practice, apart from the third point, might have no consequential effect whatsoever.
Councillor Wood, would you like to...
I would, Mr. Mayor, and could I say that, subject to my seconder being in agreement, I am more than happy to include the bullet point to write to the UK government to look into legislation to limit the noise level, and then to refer the other terms of the original motion together with the other aspects through Policy and Resources for further consideration and recommendations to the Council meeting in March. Could I just point out that in terms of that 90 decibel proposed limit, one of the big issues that we have is the fireworks which are intended for large public displays by licensed fireworks operatives frequently get into the hands of members of the public. So just limiting the noise level of fireworks available to members of the public certainly would not solve the problem. And one of my great worries is that what can only be described as bombs are in the hands of utterly inexperienced and utterly people who are, I can't say this in a polite way, so I won't say it at all, but these massive fireworks, these mortars, get into the hands of Joe and Janet public and are released in back streets, and it's a minor miracle that we haven't had a fatality from their use in Pendle. So in trying to limit the noise level for fireworks sold to the public, people are buying the category 1 fireworks, they're buying the really big, noisy and massive stuff through the internet or through black market, and they are readily available for people who want to get them. So the issue is far greater and far deeper than Councillor Coburn-Price very rightly pointed out. You know, we don't want to upset the pets. So that's one of the reasons why I think we need to do a proper job on this, rather than vote this through tonight, say, oh, well, job done, and then we don't really solve any of the problems at all. So I would urge people to give a lot more thought to this and put some practical proposals forward which the government can act upon, and we can make real change, not only in Pendle but on a wider scope as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm sorry, maybe I just was a bit thick, but you lost me towards the end there. Are you, in fact, with your amendment, proposing that we accept that we do write to the government and refer the other 3 bullet points to...
Yes, to Policy and Resources.
Thank you very much.
For further consideration, together with the other issues that people have raised this evening.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelly-Brown.
I would urge Policy and Resources, which I don't sit on, to try, when they are thinking about this, not to be too draconian, because that's less likely to succeed. What appealed to Margaret and myself was the potential for this to actually happen, these points to happen. I'm glad you are accepting the third point, but it would be great if this council, albeit it might have to spend a little bit of money, would get involved in promoting some of the sort of safer practices and making sure that local firework displays are widely promoted so that people can choose those, because people should be allowed to have a choice, while at the same time illegal use of fireworks should be stamped out.
Can I take it from that you are in fact therefore accepting the
Yes.
amendments as proposed? In which case that becomes the substantive motion in front of council, and I hope everybody out there is not quite as lost as I managed to get in that convoluted story. We are therefore accepting that we are going to have council write to the government, urging them to introduce legislation to the limit as per the third bullet point, and that we will refer bullet points 1, 2 and 4 to the Policy and Resources Committee for further consideration and reports to come back to the March meeting of council.
Plus all the other stuff that's been raised.
Yeah. Plus all the other stuff that they may wish to add in. In that case, we'll go straight to the vote then. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? Abstentions? None? Unanimous? That one is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Kevin. And 15B, Pendle's Member of Parliament. It's moved by Councillor Whittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that Council knows the result of the Pendle parliamentary election and resolve to request a meeting as soon as possible with Pendle's Member of Parliament to discuss the urgent issues facing residents of the borough and how the MP and Pendle Council could take effective action together to address these problems. Can I extend my congratulations to Andrew Stevenson on his re-election, and hope that, despite the fact that myself and others in the chamber will clearly be disappointed with the result of the election, that this does mark the start of a new beginning with efforts to make a difference here for the residents of Pendle. Listening to national politicians, and I particularly refer to Mr Johnson, and all the promises that were made during the election, I can't help but think that we are going to have a land flowing with milk and honey, as from next week, I suppose, or Christmas, or in the new year, that our public finances will be transformed and we will see people lifted out of poverty, and we will all float away on a boat of happiness into a grand European free future. However, Councillor Lord, yes, it is like a dream, and I suspect, like any dream, we will probably wake up in the new year and find that all the promises we made before the election evaporate when it's after the election. However, I'm trying not to be churlish, but we have had, thank you very much, Graham, we have had a near decade of Conservative government. In Pendle, in terms of health, we have some of the worst mortality figures in the country. The death rate amongst people in Pendle is appalling and is at the bottom end of what you might expect for a first world country. In housing, we have some of the worst housing stock. It's almost 10 years since that the housing market renewal area, flawed as it was abolished. Regeneration came to an end in Pendle, and we have struggled on with particularly private sector, private rented accommodation in appalling conditions. The economy. In Pendle, we are blessed or cursed with a low wage economy. Wages, the average wage in Pendle, and I did have the figures and I've forgotten them, I think at the last count was an average of £471 gross, well below the national average. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden everybody gets a pay increase and people get paid more. But what we want in Pendle are quality jobs, skilled jobs that are paying decent money, and that means that there's that much more lubrication within that local economy. Education, we've got low attainment. Attainment figures in Pendle are very, very low. Transport, eastward connectivity, Transpennine links. Poverty, we've had an explosion of food banks in Pendle because the very poorest amongst us can no longer afford to feed themselves and their families. Mr. Mayor, I call for a fresh start in Pendle. I call upon Pendle's MP and his government, with the big majority, to actually start taking the problems of Pendle seriously and act upon them. I know we've got a meeting with him, or we should have a meeting with him in January. I hope that meeting can be the start of working together to help solve some of the problems that I've just outlined. I've run out of time, I haven't run out of problems, and neither has Pendle. We want to see them problems solved. I move.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say, I support this motion. I want to say 2 or 3 slightly tangential things. The first is that I do think it is time for a new start, and it may well have started already with the meeting that's been taking place, between Mr. Stevenson and this council. I remember when we had MPs of different parties who worked pretty closely together with this council in a way that Mr. Stevenson, rightly or wrongly, since he first got elected, has not been willing to do. I remember David Waddington, pretty right-wing Tory, but he was MP for Nelson and Combe, not the whole of Pendle, but he went out of his way to work with the previous authorities and then briefly with this council. He was followed by Doug Hoyle, now Lord Hoyle, father of the new Speaker of the House of Commons, who again worked pretty closely with the council and certainly paid attention to things the council asked him to talk about and to take up. And he was obviously a Labour MP. Then we had the MP who I think was the best in working with the council, and that was John Lee, who at the time at least was a Conservative. He's now a Liberal Democrat member of the House of Lords, but that's irrelevant. He was a Conservative at the time. And there are a whole series of projects and things in Pendle that John took up on behalf of the council, on behalf of people, after discussing things with this authority, which was not a Conservative authority at the time. And some of them were successful and are still there, benefiting people. Some of them were not successful, but he worked hard at it. It all broke down with Gordon Prentice. I won't go into details, but we tried to have a relationship with Gordon Prentice, and in the end, the then leader of the Labour Party on this council said, impossible, we can't work with this man. And that was a general view. And it's not been good with Andrew Stevenson. I don't want to criticise Andrew Stevenson. He's obviously very successful at some things, particularly getting himself re-elected. And I don't criticise an MP for doing that, because if they don't get re-elected, then they can't continue to do what they do. But Andrew has had a view that he did not want to work closely with people he did not agree with and people who argued with him. And I went through both phases of this. At one stage on Briarfield Mill, I was deputed to be the person who talked to Andrew Stevenson because he wouldn't talk to the county council because it was Labour. He wouldn't talk to the left because he thought it was in the hands of the county council, and he wouldn't talk to Azhar Ali because he was the Labour candidate. And I was deputed, and the position was ludicrous. All sorts of separate meetings were having to take place between different people when we should have all got round the table. And then, for whatever reason, Andrew Stevenson decided he was falling out with me and would not come to meetings I was present at either. Well, I'm not bothered. I mean, he can come and talk to who he wants, he doesn't have to talk to me. But it is very important indeed that the MPs and the local authority work closely together. And it's particularly important now, I think, because the two people who I believe have been the two best MPs in recent years in fighting for East Lancashire, people may disagree with me, but I think it's Gordon Birtwistle and Graham Jones have both gone. And we now have two rookie MPs in Burnley and Accrington who may turn out to be brilliant or may not, but it will take them quite some time, and they will concentrate inevitably on their patches. And on things like the railway line rebuilding and all the other things. Graham Jones in particular used to bang the table about in East Lancashire. Well, he's gone. And in a sense, Andrew Stevenson is now the senior MP this side of Blackburn, perhaps. At least he's a senior MP, and he has got a huge responsibility on his shoulders now. And I would just say he's got to stop playing politics with it and start working hard with everybody who is here right across the parties.
Thank you very much, Councillor Councillor Pendle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, can I say thank you to Councillor Wick for congratulating Mr. Stevenson on his success, and I hope he congratulates him again when he's completed his 14 years and wins the next election. Can I say also, Mr. Mayor, I do accept the suggestion of everyone working together, and how good it will be when this council collectively demonstrates that, and we all work together collectively for the benefit of Pendle. I'm pleased to see the suggestions of roads running in milk and honey. Well, I also want to think about prefer that as we are aware that we will shortly be successful in leaving Brexit. We will have the subsequent benefits that will come from the departure of Brexit, and that funding will be coming out, as has been promised, and will be delivered for benefits in the North West, for the industrial benefits and the road benefits for the North West, where we will be extending extensively in bringing new jobs in as well. We're pleased to say, we talk about houses, that the houses in Borough Ford, of course, will in the next 5 years, before the next election, be well underway with new residents, and they will be bringing in potential for new investment and new jobs for them to be completed. There will be quality jobs, as we all know, and we're aware of that. And I would say, Mr. Mayor, how wonderful it is that Mr. Stevenson does in fact meet members of this council, I believe on a regular basis, at least on a quarterly basis, if not more. And I'm sure that he has a meeting, I understand, from what Councillor Whipper said, within the next 31 days. And as a consequence of that, I'm sure that we will be able to see the heralding of the next decade with a great investment and great benefit that will be coming from the government, and that Andrew will be leading with other members and showing how the benefits will come through, and we will benefit in Pendle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Unbelievable. Councillors, this motion asks us to write to the MP Andrew Stevenson, and surely we can all agree that the council ought to write to the MP. Those in favour of the...
Mr. Mayor, can I respond to the debate?
Oh, sorry. Councillor.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, and briefly, I think Councillor Turner has fallen for the land flowing with milk and honey scandal. I do try and pluck the positive out of any situation. I do hope that some of the promises that we have heard will come to be. I have to say that the best indication of future actions is based upon what people have done in the past. Earlier in the meeting, the leader of the council pointed out that this council has suffered £8 million of government cuts since 2010. On the table, we have a further £4 million of government cuts coming down the line. In a triumph of hope over experience, I hope the situation will change. I hope that we won't have to make £4 million worth of more cuts to the services that Pendle Council, just Pendle Council, provides for the residents of Pendle. I hope that we do have that new beginning. I am rather sceptical of Councillor Turner's faith in a Brexit boost, but everything will become apparent in the next decade, won't it? It will probably take us a decade to actually negotiate everything that needs to be negotiated following, but I don't want to go into that. Councillor Turner's faith in Barrowford having new houses, well, there's a planning application coming along. I'm sure Councillor Turner will have a view on that. And, he said we'll have quality jobs. Okay? Let's just see what a drain of high-value jobs there is in Pendle from the impact of the changes that we're just about to go through. I remain optimistic, but I believe, Mr. Mayor, we have got to work to try and get what we can from the present situation. And looking backwards, I'm afraid Pendle has been dumped upon for the last 9 years. Let's hope that the next 5 years we will have an upward trajectory rather than that continuing downward spiral.
Thank you very much indeed. We go straight to the vote then. Those in favour of the motion as written, please indicate. Those against?
What commitment?
The motion is carried.
Obviously no faith in this.
More of the same.
Item 15C.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Pendle is a place where local people can have real influence on local decisions through the area committees set up a quarter of a century ago. The prospect of a so-called super council, run from Blackburn or even Preston, fills local people with horror. Such a massive unitary will be anything but local, and calling it local government will be nothing more than a lie. We don't want to be run by Blackburn. We don't want to be run by Preston. We want Pendle people to remain responsible for local decisions on local matters. I therefore, Mr Mayor, move that the Council notes the proposal for a Pennine Lancashire Unitary Authority put forward by Blackburn with Darwin Unitary Authority and the alternative put forward by the leader of Lancashire County Council, requesting that any unitary proposals cover the whole of the council's area. Council reaffirms its opposition to the creation of any such massive and removed structures. Massive and remote structures, believing that local issues are best determined at a local level, and that the government has far more urgent issues than shuffling the deck chairs, and instructs the Chief Executive to write accordingly to the relevant government minister. Mr Mayor, I move. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to say that. Also, I think that we tend to find that the bigger the area, the bigger the problem it is in Pendle. We're too far away from the actual action that should be taken. And I think if this goes ahead, we will suffer even more than what we're doing now. Yeah, thank you.
In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. For those in favour of the motion set down, please raise their hand. Those against?
5 against. Mr Mayor, could you give us the numbers, please?
Thank you very much for your deliberation this evening. Can I reiterate my invitation for you to join the Mayoress and I in the members' room if you so wish to partake a little bit of Christmas refreshment. And if you don't wish to sort of come along to that, can I also take this opportunity to wish all the councillors and members of the public in the room here a very Merry Christmas and a safe, healthy and Happy New Year. Thank you very much indeed.
All our favourites.
Will you do yourself